Listen close, because this story starts with a broken promise and ends with something beautiful. It is about a woman who traveled 1,000 miles to marry a stranger, only to find herself abandoned at a dusty train station in the middle of nowhere. But that abandonment turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to her. If you have ever felt lost, abandoned, or like the world was working against you, stay with me. Comment below what city you are watching from, because this story needs to travel far and wide. Women everywhere need to know that sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead us exactly where we are meant to be. Now, let me tell you about Marble Hayes. The train whistle cut through the afternoon heat as Marble pressed her hand against the sooty window, her heart hammered in her chest. That familiar mixture of hope and terror that had become her constant companion over the past 3 days of travel from Philadelphia to Wyoming. She was 26 years old, and everything she owned in the world fit inside one battered leather suitcase. 2 spare dresses, a nightgown, her mother's Bible, a silver hairbrush that had been her grandmother's, and $17 that represented her entire life savings. Not much to show for 26 years of living, but it was hers. The conductor's voice boomed through the passenger car. Red Butte Station, Red Butte, 5-minute stop. 5 minutes. That was all it would take for her entire life to change. Marbell smoothed the wrinkles from her gray traveling dress and tried to calm her racing thoughts. She was here to marry Miles Dandridge, a man she had never met in person, a man who had answered her letter to his advertisement in the Matrimonial Times. The advertisement had been simple. Widower, 42, seeks respectable woman for marriage and companionship. Must be of good character and willing to work. Ranch life, Wyoming Territory. Marbell had read those words 100 times, looking for hidden meanings between the lines. Would he be kind? Would he keep his promises? Or was this just another version of the lies she had been told her whole life? The train shuddered to a stop, and Marbell grabbed her suitcase. She made her way to the exit, her knees trembling. Through the windows, she could see Red Butte was not much of a town. Just a wooden platform, a small ticket office, and a handful of weathered buildings lining a dusty main street. And somewhere in that cluster of buildings was the man she was supposed to marry. She stepped down onto the platform, and the heat hit her like a physical force. The Wyoming sun was nothing like Philadelphia. It was dry and relentless, pulling the moisture right out of your body. Marbell stood on the platform and searched for a tall, dark-haired man in a brown leather vest. That was how Miles had described himself in his letters. But as the minutes ticked by and other passengers moved past her with purpose, no one approached. No one stepped forward with a smile of recognition. Her heart sank with each passing second. A young conductor noticed her standing alone. "Can I help you, miss?" "I am supposed to be meeting someone," Marbell said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Mr. Miles Dandridge. Do you know him?" The conductor's face brightened. "Oh, sure. Mr. Dandridge has a place about 15 miles east of here." Then his expression clouded, "though I do not see him here at the moment." "You certain he knew you were arriving today?" "I sent a telegram last week confirming my arrival," Marbell said. The panic was wrapping around her throat now like a noose. "He should be here." "Well, maybe he got held up. Ranch life, you know. Always something demanding attention. You can wait in the station office if you like." But Marbell did not move. Something felt wrong. A man who was expecting his bride, a bride who had traveled 1,000 miles to marry him, that man would not be late. That man would have been waiting on the platform an hour early, unless he had changed his mind. The thought crashed over her like ice water. What if Miles had received her final letter, the one where she had been honest about having no dowry, about having to borrow money for the train fare, about having no family to vouch for her character? What if he had decided she was not worth the trouble? What would she do then? She had $17 to her name. Not enough to get back to Philadelphia, even if she wanted to return to that city of broken promises. Not enough to start over anywhere else. The train's whistle blew again, warning that it would be departing shortly. Within minutes, the locomotive would pull away, taking with it her last connection to the world she had known, leaving her stranded in this dusty Wyoming town with no husband, no prospects, and nowhere to go. Marbell felt dizzy. The heat and the fear and the exhaustion from 3 days of travel all caught up with her at once. She set down her suitcase and pressed a hand to her forehead, trying to steady her breathing. That was when the commotion started. Voices rose in alarm at the edge of the platform. People scattered. Through the dissipating steam and the milling crowd, Marbell caught a glimpse of movement, something small and fast, darting between adults, heading straight toward her. A child, a boy no more than 7 or 8 years old, with dark hair sticking up in all directions and dust streaked across his tear-stained face. He was running full speed, his boots pounding against the wooden planks, and there was something wild in his eyes, something desperate and hopeful and terrified all at once. Behind him, a tall man in dusty work clothes was giving chase. "Eli! Eli, stop! Come back here!" But the boy did not stop. He ran directly toward Marbell, weaving between startled onlookers. His eyes locked on her face with an intensity that was almost frightening. The boy reached her and crashed into her skirts, his small arms wrapping around her waist, his face pressing against the fabric of her dress. Marbell stumbled backward, barely maintaining her balance, shocked by the sudden impact. Then the boy looked up at her, and Marbell's breath caught in her chest. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray-blue and swimming with tears. His face was thin, almost gaunt, with sharp cheekbones that spoke of too many meals missed or too much grief carried. "Mama," his voice cracked on the word, small and trembling. "Mama, are you finally here? Did you come back?" The platform had gone silent. Every eye was on them now. Marbell felt the weight of those stares, felt the collective breath being held, waiting to see what she would do. She should correct him. She should gently explain that she was not his mother, that there had been a mistake. But the boy, Eli, was shaking now, trembling like a leaf in a storm, and his grip on her dress was so tight his knuckles had gone white. Without thinking, operating purely on instinct, Marbell knelt down. She brought herself to eye level with the boy and placed her hands on his thin shoulders. "Sweetheart," she said softly, and the word surprised her. "Sweetheart, I think there has been a mistake." "No," the boy's voice rose, panicked. "No, you look just like her, just like the picture Papa keeps. You have the same eyes, the same hair. It is you, is it not? You came back." Before Marbell could respond, the tall man who had been chasing the boy finally caught up. He was breathing hard, his face flushed beneath several days' worth of dark beard stubble. He wore dusty work clothes and a faded blue shirt, and his hat had fallen off during the chase. "Eli, I am so sorry," he said, reaching for the boy's shoulder. His voice was rough, strained with embarrassment and pain. "Come on, son. This is not, she is not, she is." Eli twisted away from his father's hand, pressing closer to Marbell. "Papa, look at her. Really look. It is Mama." The tall man's eyes finally met Marble's. She saw a shock flicker in their depths, followed by something that might have been recognition. They were dark eyes, nearly black in the afternoon sun, set in a face that was hard and weathered, but might have been handsome once, before grief carved lines around his mouth. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, and Marble felt something pass between them. A current of understanding, of shared sorrow, of two people who had both learned that life does not give you what you hope for, only what you can survive. "I apologize for my son," the man said, his voice carefully controlled now. "He lost his mother last winter. Sometimes he still looks for her." "I am not looking for her," Eli protested, his voice breaking. "I found her. Papa, why can you not see? It is really her." Marble's heart cracked. She kept her hands on Eli's shoulders, steady and warm, and spoke directly to him. "What is your name, sweetheart?" "Eli," he whispered. "Eli Turner." "Eli, that is a strong name. I am Marbell Hayes." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "I just arrived on the train from Philadelphia. I have never been to Wyoming before today. I have never met your mama." She watched his face as comprehension slowly broke through the desperate hope. His expression crumpled, tears finally spilling over. "But you look so much like her," he said, his voice barely audible. "I know," Marbell said gently. "I know what it is like to hope for something so hard it feels real." The man, Eli's father, reached for his son again. This time, Eli did not resist, but as he was pulled back, the boy kept his eyes fixed on Marble's face. "Thank you," Eli's father said, settling his hands on the boy's shoulders. "This is not how we usually greet strangers." "No apology necessary," Marbell assured him, rising to her feet. "Grief makes us all do unexpected things." The man studied her for a moment. "You said you just arrived. Are you being met by someone?" And there it was. The question that would expose her situation, her foolishness, for all the town to see. She could lie. She could claim she was visiting relatives or that her husband was waiting at the hotel. But Marbell had learned that lies always caught up with you eventually. "I was supposed to be met," she said, keeping her voice level. "But it seems my intended did not receive my telegram." Or perhaps she let the sentence trail off, unable to finish it. Perhaps he changed his mind. Perhaps he was never serious. Perhaps I have been played for a fool. Understanding dawned in the man's eyes, followed by something that looked like sympathy. Mail order bride. The words stung, but they were true. "Yes, I am supposed to marry Miles Dandridge." The reaction was immediate and impossible to miss. The man's expression hardened. Eli's eyes went wide, and from the crowd of onlookers still watching, Marbell heard a collective intake of breath. "Miles Dandridge," the man repeated slowly, his voice gone cold. "You are here to marry Miles Dandridge." That was the arrangement, yes. Marble's heart was racing. "Do you know him? Do you know where I might find him?" The man looked at his son, then back at Marble, weighing options. "I'm Caleb Turner. I have the ranch adjacent to Dandridge's property. And I think there's some things you need to know about the man you have traveled all this way to marry." Caleb Turner's wagon was hitched outside the mercantile, a sturdy farm wagon that had seen better days but was well maintained. He helped Marbell up onto the bench seat, his hand calloused but steady. Eli scrambled up between them, still watching Marbell with those storm-gray eyes. As they pulled away from the station, Caleb spoke. His voice was grim. "Miles Dandridge is not the man he pretended to be in his letters. He has done this before. Advertised for a bride, gotten money sent ahead, then disappeared before the woman arrived. He preys on women who are desperate enough to take a chance on a stranger. The words hit Marble like physical blows. Desperate. That was what she was. Desperate enough to board a train to Wyoming. Desperate enough to agree to marry a man she had never met. "But I did not send any money," she heard herself say. "I told him I had no dowry. I was very clear about that." Caleb's expression softened slightly. Then maybe there was some other reason he did not show, but I would be lying if I told you I thought it was a good reason. "Miles Dandridge is not a man of honor, Miss Hayes. If he has left you stranded here, you are better off without him." Better off? The laugh that escaped Marble's throat was bitter. "I have nowhere to go, no money to get there. Even if I did, everything I own is in that suitcase. So please forgive me if I do not feel particularly grateful for being abandoned." Silence fell over the wagon. Then Eli spoke, his voice small but determined. "She can stay with us." "Eli," Caleb started. "Papa, she has got nowhere to go. You said so yourself. And we have got the extra room since Mama went to heaven. It is not right to leave her alone." Marble looked at this small, grieving child who was trying to save her and felt something crack open inside her chest. "That is very kind, but I could not impose." "It is not an imposition if we are offering," Caleb interrupted. He was watching her with those dark eyes, measuring, assessing. "Eli is right. We do have the room." He paused. "There is a boarding house in town. Mrs. Kelly runs a respectable place. She might have a room you could rent while you figure out your next steps." "With what money?" Marble asked bluntly. "I have $17, Mr. Turner. That might buy me a week at a boarding house if I am lucky. And then what?" She saw respect flash in Caleb's eyes. Respect for her honesty, maybe, or for her refusal to pretend. "Then stay at the ranch," he said, "just for a few days, until we figure something out. You can help with the cooking and housework if it makes you feel better about accepting charity. God knows the place has fallen apart since Sarah died." The honesty of it stole her breath. This man was laying his soul bare, admitting his failures as a father, offering help because his dead wife's absence had left a hole in his life he did not know how to fill. "All right," Marble heard herself say, "just for a few days." The ride to the ranch took about an hour. The landscape was vast and empty in a way that would have been beautiful if Marble had not been so exhausted. The sky was enormous, and the grass rolled like waves on an ocean. "It is so empty," she said. "That is what most folks say when they first get here," Caleb replied. "Give it time. You start seeing things you missed at first." When they reached the Turner Ranch, Marble saw a collection of buildings huddled together against the vastness. A main house, a barn, several outbuildings, and a corral where horses moved lazily. The house was a simple two-story structure with a wide porch. Nothing fancy, but solid home. Inside, the house smelled like dust and disuse. The front room had a stone fireplace and windows that let in good light. Everything was coated in dust. Dishes were stacked on side tables, boots kicked off near the door. The general air of masculine disorder spoke of men living without a woman's organizing hand. "I know it is a mess," Caleb said, embarrassment in his voice. "It is fine," Marble assured him. "I have seen worse." Eli showed her to the spare room upstairs. It was small but clean, with a quilt on the bed that had been carefully made. "Mama made that quilt," Eli said softly. "It is beautiful," Marbell said, meaning it. That evening, Marbell insisted on helping with supper. In the kitchen, she found Sarah's recipe book tucked in a drawer, pages stained and dog-eared. She made beans and cornbread, simple but filling. They ate at the big kitchen table as the last light faded from the windows. Eli watched her constantly, as if reassuring himself she was still there. "This is good," Caleb said. "Better than anything Eli and I have managed in months." After supper, Marbell cleaned up despite Caleb's protests. Eli helped her, carefully drying dishes with a towel too big for him. When the kitchen was restored to order, Caleb sent Eli upstairs. The boy went reluctantly, clearly afraid that if he left Marbell alone, she might disappear. "I will still be here in the morning," she assured him. "I promise." After Eli left, Caleb stood in the kitchen doorway. "About what Eli said earlier, about wanting you to stay, I hope you do not think I put him up to that. He is just struggling." "I understand," Marbell said. "I love Sarah more than I knew how to say," Caleb continued, his voice rough. "When she died, it was like someone carved out my insides. The worst part is, Eli needs me to be whole, and I cannot figure out how to give him that when I am barely holding myself together." The raw honesty surprised her. "Grief does not work on a schedule," Marbell said softly. "The best you can do is learn to carry it without letting it crush you." "And how do you do that?" Caleb asked. "I do not know. I am still figuring that out myself." They stood looking at each other in the lamplight, two broken people recognizing their own damage in someone else's face. Over the next 10 days, life at the ranch fell into a rhythm. Marbell rose with the sun and had coffee ready before Caleb and Eli stirred. She scrubbed floors, washed curtains, organized shelves. She found satisfaction in making the house clean again. Caleb worked from dawn to dusk, tending cattle, mending fences, doing all the tasks that kept a ranch running. He would come in for meals, exhausted and dusty, but Marbell noticed he started lingering at the table after supper. Eli bloomed like a flower after rain. The hollow look began to fade from his eyes. He laughed more, played more, brought Marbell wildflowers from the prairie. On the 10th day, Caleb found Marbell in the kitchen. "I have been thinking about your situation, about what you are going to do next. I know I cannot stay here indefinitely," Marbell said quickly. "That is not what I meant. Actually, I have a proposal, a business arrangement. You need work, I need help. The ranch is falling apart because I cannot keep up with everything. I need someone who can manage the house, cook proper meals, help with Eli, room and board, plus $20 a month." $20 a month. Marbell's mind raced. In a few months she could save enough to move on, or maybe stay longer. "Why?" she asked. "You do not know me." Caleb met her eyes steadily. "Because yesterday my son smiled for the first time in 6 months. Because you cleaned my kitchen without being asked. Because you knelt down in the dust and promised a grieving boy you would not lie to him." He paused. "And because I saw how you looked at that train station when you realized your groom was not coming. I know what that looks like." "I will need to set some ground rules," Marbell said carefully. "This is a business arrangement. You are my employer. I keep my own room. I make my own choices." "Agreed," Caleb said. He extended his hand. "Do we have a deal?" Marbell looked at his outstretched hand and thought about all the hands that had reached for her over the years. This hand was different. She shook it firmly. "We have a deal." The days that followed were peaceful. Marbell settled into her role, and the house transformed under her care. She learned Eli's favorite meals from Sarah's recipe book and taught herself to make biscuits that were almost as fluffy as the ones he described. Caleb worked long hours, but always made time for Eli in the evenings. Marble would watch them together, father and son, and feel something warm in her chest. This was what a family should be: honest and hard-working and kind. She was hanging laundry in the yard one afternoon when she saw the rider approaching from the east. Something about the way the man sat his horse, too casual, too confident, set her teeth on edge. Caleb emerged from the barn, and she saw his posture stiffen. His hand moved unconsciously to his hip, as if checking for a gun that was not there. "Go inside," he called to Marbell, his voice hard. "Who is it?" "Just go inside. Take Eli with you." But it was too late. The rider had already covered the distance to the house. Now Marble could see him clearly. He was perhaps 40, with slicked back dark hair and a mustache waxed to sharp points. He wore expensive clothes, a vest with silver buttons, polished boots. Everything about him screamed money and self-importance. He pulled his horse to a stop and surveyed the ranch with amused disdain. His eyes passed over Caleb dismissively, then landed on Marbell and stayed there, traveling up and down her body with a proprietorial assessment that made her skin crawl. "Well, well," the man said, his voice smooth as oil. "Looks like someone has been making improvements around here, Turner. Got yourself a new housekeeper. What do you want, Dandridge?" Caleb's voice was cold enough to freeze water. Marble's blood turned to ice. Dandridge, Miles Dandridge, the man she was supposed to marry. Miles dismounted and approached her with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "My dear Miss Hayes, I cannot apologize enough for the unfortunate misunderstanding at the station. I was detained by urgent business in Denver and only just returned to find your telegram waiting. Naturally, I rode here immediately to collect you." Every word was a lie. Marbell could see it in the way his eyes shifted. "Collect me," she repeated, "like a piece of luggage you left at the station." Miles's smile tightened. "I understand you are upset, but now that I am here, we can proceed with the wedding arrangements." "She is not going anywhere with you," Caleb interrupted, moving to stand between Marble and Miles. "She has got employment here, room, board, and fair wages. She does not need your charity or your lies." Miles's expression hardened. "Employment? How convenient. Your wife barely cold in the ground, and already you have got a replacement warming your bed." Caleb lunged forward, but Marbell grabbed his arm. "Do not. He is not worth it." Miles laughed. "You are legally tied to me by contract, Miss Hayes. You signed an agreement that makes you mine." "Yours?" Marbell repeated incredulously. "I am not property." Miles reached into his vest and pulled out a folded paper. "You signed this, agreeing to marry me. I paid for your train ticket, which makes you legally obligated to fulfill the terms." "You paid for her ticket?" Caleb's voice was sharp. "Funny, because Marble told me she borrowed money to pay for it herself." Miles's expression flickered, but he recovered quickly. "I reimbursed her." "Show me the receipt," Marble demanded. "If you sent money, you will have a receipt." Miles's jaw tightened. "I do not need to prove anything. The contract is clear. Now get your things. We are leaving." "No," Marbell said simply. Miles took a step closer, real menace in his voice now. "You are confused about your position. You are an unmarried woman alone in a territory you do not know, with no family, no resources. I am a respected landowner with connections throughout the territory. Who is going to take your word over mine?" "I will," Caleb said, "and so will every decent person in Red Butte who knows what kind of man you really are." "Oh?" Miles's smile was cruel now. "You mean the same people who whisper about how quickly you took up with another woman after your wife died? The same people who wonder if maybe Sarah's death was not quite as natural as you claimed?" Caleb went white. "Poor Sarah," Miles continued. "Married to a man who could not provide properly. Working herself to death. Is it any wonder she got sick?" "Get off my land," Caleb said, shaking with rage. "Get off my land before I do something we will both regret. I will leave when I get what I came for." Miles turned back to Marble. "Last chance. Come with me now, and we will say no more about this. Refuse, and I will make sure everyone knows you are a woman of questionable morals who broke a legal contract. You will never find respectable work anywhere in this territory." The threat hung in the air. Marble felt the weight of it. One word from him could destroy everything. But she had spent 3 years in Philadelphia being afraid. She was done being afraid. "Then I guess you will have plenty to talk about," she said clearly, "because I am not going anywhere with you." "That is enough," Caleb said, standing shoulder to shoulder with Marble. "This is not over," Miles hissed. "That contract is legally binding, and I will enforce it. Papa." They turned to see Eli running from the house, his face streaked with tears. He had been watching from the window. He ran straight to Marble and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Do not let him take her, Papa," the boy sobbed. "Please do not let him take her away." Miles looked at the crying child with undisguised disgust. How touching, the replacement mother and the pathetic orphan. Something in Marble snapped. She stepped forward, putting herself between Miles and Eli. "You are absolutely right about one thing, Mr. Dandridge. We are broken. Life has beaten us down and left us struggling to survive. But that does not make us weak. It makes us survivors. And I would rather be broken and honest than whole and rotten like you." Miles stared at her, shock written on his face. Then his expression twisted into something ugly. "You will regret this, both of you. I will make sure of it." He mounted his horse and before riding away, looked back at them. "This is not over. Not by a long shot." They watched him ride away, dust hanging in the air like a bad omen. "Is he going to take you away?" Eli whispered. "No, sweetheart. He is not going to take me anywhere." But even as she said it, Marble knew this was just the beginning. Caleb hitched the wagon. "We should go into town, talk to the sheriff, get this documented properly." The ride to Red Butte was tense. Eli sat pressed against Marble's side, quieter than usual. The sheriff's office was near the center of town. Sheriff Tom Bradshaw was a man in his 50s, with iron gray hair and a weathered face. He looked up as they entered, his expression shifting to concern when he saw Caleb's face. "Caleb, what is wrong?" "Miles Dandridge showed up at my ranch today making threats." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "What kind of threats?" Caleb explained everything. When he finished, the sheriff turned to Marble. "Is this true, ma'am?" "Yes, sir," Marble said. His exact words were, "That makes you mine, whether you like it or not." The sheriff muttered something under his breath. "Did he threaten violence?" "Not directly," Caleb said, "but he was intimidating, aggressive. He threatened to destroy both our reputations." "Did he produce any documentation?" "He waved around a letter I signed," Marble said. "But, Sheriff, I never received any money from him. and he abandoned me at the station. Does that not void any agreement?" Sheriff Bradshaw leaned back. "I am not a lawyer, ma'am, but I can tell you this. We do not enforce slavery contracts in this territory. If you do not want to marry Miles Dandridge, no piece of paper can force you to. Now, he could potentially sue you for breach of contract, but that is a civil matter. What I can do is document your complaint officially. If he tries anything else, shows up at the Turner Ranch again, you come straight back here." "There is something else you should know," the sheriff continued. "Miles Dandridge is not the upstanding citizen he pretends to be. He has done this before, advertising for brides, taking their money, then disappearing or making their lives hell. We have had 3 complaints in the last 2 years, but the women were too frightened to press charges. If you are willing to stand up to him officially, it might give the others courage to come forward too." "I will do whatever it takes," Marbell said firmly. For the next hour, Marbell recounted the entire story. When it was finished, Sheriff Bradshaw closed the ledger. "This is officially documented. If Dandridge makes any more threats, let me know immediately. Miles Dandridge is a snake, and snakes do not give up easy." They left the sheriff's office and stopped at the mercantile for supplies. Mrs. Jameson, the gray-haired woman behind the counter, looked up as they entered. Her gaze went immediately to Marbell. "I heard you had a new housekeeper," Mrs. Jameson said. "The mail-order bride who was supposed to marry Miles Dandridge." "Miss Hayes works for me," Caleb confirmed. "She is doing an excellent job." "I am sure she is." Mrs. Jameson's tone suggested she thought Marbell was managing more than just the household. "Your wife barely cold in the ground, and already you have got another woman in her place." Before Caleb could respond, Marbell stepped forward. "Mrs. Jameson, I understand this looks unconventional, but Mr. Turner offered me honest employment when I had nowhere else to go. I would appreciate being judged on my actions rather than on gossip and assumptions." The older woman stared at her. Then her expression softened slightly. "Fair enough. What supplies do you need?" As they loaded supplies into the wagon, Marbell caught sight of Miles across the street, standing in front of the saloon. Their eyes met, and Miles smiled. A slow, deliberate expression that promised nothing good. The war came 3 days later. Marbell was in the kitchen when she heard multiple horses approaching. Through the window, she saw not just Miles, but 5 other men with guns on their hips. "Caleb!" she called out, alarm in her voice. He appeared within seconds, saw the riders, and his face went hard. "Go inside. Get Eli and go upstairs. Lock yourself in my room. I am not hiding while you—" "Marbell, please. If something happens to me, Eli needs you alive. Go now." She ran to find Eli and pulled him inside. "We are going upstairs very quietly and staying in your papa's room." From the window, she watched Miles and his men surround Caleb. One of them pulled out a rolled paper. Miles had actually gone to a judge. 2 of the men started walking toward the house. "No," Marbell breathed. "Miss Hayes," Miles' voice called up the stairs. "I have a court order requiring you to fulfill the terms of our contract. You can come down peacefully, or my associates can come up and fetch you." Footsteps on the stairs. They were coming. Marbell made a split-second decision. She grabbed the pencil and paper from Caleb's bedside table and scribbled frantically. "Being taken against my will by Miles Dandridge and armed men. This is kidnapping, not consent. Marbell Hayes." She shoved it under the mattress. She knelt in front of Eli. "I have to go with them right now, but your papa and the sheriff are going to fix this. I will be back. I promise." The door shuddered under a heavy blow. Marbell unlocked the door. Two men stood there, both with hands on their guns. "Smart choice," one said. She walked between them down the stairs. In the front room, Miles waited with a smile of triumph. He held out the paper for her to see. "Everything legal and proper. We are to be married this afternoon." "This is kidnapping," Marbell said coldly. "I am simply enforcing a legal contract." Miles extended his arm. "Shall we?" Outside, Caleb was being restrained by two men, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. "I will kill you for this, Dandridge," Caleb snarled, threatening murder in front of witnesses. Miles turned to his men. "Get her on a horse." One of the men grabbed Marbell's arm and started pulling her toward the horses. She stumbled, and that was when she saw Eli standing in the doorway, tears streaming down his face. Something broke inside Marbell. She had spent her whole life being pushed around. But looking at that little boy's devastated face, she realized some things were worth fighting for. "No," she said, and ripped her arm free. "No," she repeated louder. "I will not go with you. I do not care what papers you have forged. I am not your property, and I will not marry you." Miles's face contorted with rage, and he closed the distance between them. Before she could react, his hand cracked across her face, splitting her lip. "You will do exactly what I tell you," he hissed. Marbell tasted blood, but she smiled anyway. There it is, the real Miles Dandridge. Not the gentleman, but the monster underneath. Miles raised his hand to strike her again, but a voice cut through the tension. "I would not do that if I were you." Everyone turned. Sheriff Bradshaw sat on his horse with 4 deputized men, all armed. Behind them were Mrs. Jameson and several other townspeople, witnesses. Relief crashed over Marbell. Miles's men immediately released Caleb and stepped back. Miles went pale. "Sheriff, I am simply enforcing a legal contract." "Let me see that court order," Sheriff Bradshaw interrupted. Miles hesitated before handing it over. The sheriff read it carefully, his expression growing darker. "This is supposedly from Judge Hackett. Problem is, Judge Hackett is currently in Denver on territorial business. Has been for the past 2 weeks. So unless he signed this from 100 miles away, it is a forgery." The silence was absolute. "Furthermore," the sheriff continued, "you just struck an unarmed woman in front of multiple witnesses. That is assault, and holding someone against their will is kidnapping." He turned to his deputies. "Arrest him. Arrest all of them." Miles tried to run, but deputies grabbed him. Within minutes, all 6 men were in handcuffs. Caleb rushed to Marbell, his hands hovering over her face. "Are you all right?" "I am fine." "How did the sheriff know to come?" "Eli. When they took you downstairs, he climbed out the window and ran for help. He made it to the Johnson Ranch, and they rode straight to town." Eli ran across the yard toward them. Marbell dropped to her knees and caught him in her arms. "You brave, brilliant boy," she whispered. "You saved me." "I told you nobody was going to take you away from us," Eli said. Sheriff Bradshaw approached. "Miss Hayes, I will need a full statement from you when you are ready. We found something interesting when we searched Dandridge's property. Letters from at least 7 different women, all responding to his advertisements, and receipts for money transfers that went into his personal accounts. Mr. Dandridge has been running an elaborate fraud operation for years. Will they testify? Marbell asked. If we can find them. Yes. And with your willingness to press charges, we finally have a victim brave enough to stand up in court. This is going to be a long legal battle. Dandridge has money and connections. Are you prepared for that? Marbell thought about running. It would be easier, safer. Then she felt Eli's hand in hers, felt Caleb's presence beside her. She thought about those 7 other women. I am prepared, she said. I will testify to everything. The days after Miles's arrest were strange. The shock was wearing off, replaced by the reality of what lay ahead. A trial, testimony, public scrutiny. Marbell stood on the porch one evening, watching the sunset. Caleb found her there. The sheriff says Dandridge's lawyer's already working on getting him released on bail, Caleb said. Claims he is not a flight risk. Will they grant it? Bradshaw thinks they might. Caleb leaned against the railing. But there is more. The sheriff has been digging into those other women. He has found 3 so far, and all 3 are willing to testify. With your testimony added to theirs, we might actually have enough to put him away for a long time. Might, Marbell repeated, not will. Trials are unpredictable. If you have changed your mind about testifying, if you want to just disappear, I would understand. I would help you. I am not running, Marbell interrupted. We have been through this. That was before you were legally tied to me. If Dandridge comes after you again, he will come after my family now. Then we protect Eli together. That is what partnership means, is it not? Caleb studied her face. You are the bravest person I have ever met. We should probably discuss the sleeping arrangements, Caleb said, becoming business like I meant what I said about building you a separate cabin if you want one. Very proper, Marbell agreed. Should we establish other rules? Maybe we keep it simple. We both contribute what we can. You handle the ranch work, I handle the house and Eli's care. We make major decisions together, we respect each other's privacy, and we are honest with each other. Especially when it is uncomfortable, Caleb amended. I will not have lies between us. They shook hands, sealing their business-like agreement. But 2 days later, Marbell made a decision that surprised even her. She found Caleb in the barn. I have been thinking about the trial, about how this is going to look when people find out I am testifying against a man I was supposed to marry while living with another man. We can build you that separate cabin, Caleb offered. I have a different solution. Marbell took a deep breath. What if we got married? A marriage of convenience, purely practical. You need someone to help with Eli and the house. I need legal protection and a place to stay. Marriage would solve both problems and silence any gossip. Caleb stared at her. You want to marry me after you just escaped being forced to marry someone else? I answered because I was tired of being afraid, Marbell said. I thought marrying a stranger in Wyoming could not be worse than what I was already living. But you are not Miles Dandridge. You offered me freedom and respect. So yes, I want to marry you if you will have me. You would really be my mama? Eli asked from the barn doorway. He had been listening. For real and forever? For real and forever, Marbell confirmed. But only if your father agrees. Caleb walked to the window, struggling with something. When he turned back, his expression was raw. I loved Sarah. When she died, I thought that was it for me. And now you are suggesting we marry for convenience. Does that not seem wrong somehow? Does that not dishonor what marriage is supposed to be? I do not know what marriage is supposed to be, Marble admitted. I only know what it could be for us. A partnership between two people who respect each other, who need each other. You loved Sarah, and that is beautiful. I would never ask you to forget that. But maybe what we build could be different. Caleb looked at his son, then back at Marbell. All right. If you are sure, then yes, I will marry you. Eli let out a whoop of joy. They were married 3 days later in the small church at Red Butte. Marbell wore her best dress, the blue cotton, and carried wildflowers Eli had picked. Caleb wore a clean shirt and his Sunday vest. Reverend Matthews kept the service brief. Do you, Caleb Turner, take Marble Hayes to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do, Caleb said, his voice steady. And do you, Marble Hayes, take Caleb Turner to be your lawfully wedded husband? Marbell looked at the man beside her. She thought about all the ways this could go wrong. Then she thought about Eli and the life she could build here. I do, she said clearly. There were no rings. Instead, Caleb took her hand in his, and the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife. The reception was modest, held at the ranch with neighbors bringing food. Sheriff Bradshaw attended, taking Caleb aside at one point. When Caleb returned, his expression was dark. Later, when guests had departed, Caleb found Marble on the porch. The sheriff says Dandridge's lawyer is working on getting him released on bail. He could be out within the week. But there is more. The sheriff has found 3 of those other women, and all 3 are willing to testify. With your testimony added to theirs, we might actually have enough to put him away for a long time. Might, Marbell repeated. Trials are unpredictable. Caleb turned to look at her. If you have changed your mind. I am not running, Marbell interrupted firmly. Then we protect Eli together, Caleb said. That night, Marble stayed in her own room as agreed. They were married, but it was purely practical. A business arrangement, she told herself that was enough. But lying in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the house, she found herself wondering what it would be like if this marriage were real in every sense. The summons came 2 weeks later. Miles Dandridge's trial was scheduled to begin in 10 days, and Marbell's presence was required as a witness for the prosecution. The prosecutor, James Whitmore, came to the ranch 3 times to prepare her. He was thorough and professional, but Marble could see the doubt in his eyes. Dandridge's lawyer is Albert Cunningham, Whitmore explained. He is one of the best defense attorneys in the territory. Expensive, ruthless, and very good at making witnesses look unreliable. He will attack your credibility, Mrs. Turner. He will try to make the jury believe you are a gold digger who targeted Mr. Dandridge, and when he rejected you, you sought revenge. But I did not target him. He advertised for a bride. I know that. But Cunningham will suggest you misrepresented yourself, that you were trying to defraud Dandridge. Then, when he discovered your deception, you concocted this story to punish him. So no matter what I say, he will make me look like the villain. He will try. That is why we need you to stay calm. Answer questions directly. Do not get defensive or emotional. The moment you lose your temper or start crying, Cunningham will use it against you. After Whitmore left, Marbell stood on the porch, feeling the weight of what was coming. You do not have to do this, Caleb said quietly. We could leave, take Eli, go to California. The offer was tempting, but running would mean Miles won. No, Marbell said firmly. I am seeing this through. Caleb took her hand. Not a casual touch, but a deliberate gesture of support. Then I will be there with you. Every minute of that trial. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in late September. The courthouse was packed with spectators. Marble walked into that courtroom with her head high and her hand in Caleb's. Miles sat at the defense table looking smug, dressed in an expensive suit. When his eyes met Marble's, he smiled, a cruel expression that promised she would regret crossing him. Beside him, Albert Cunningham looked as dangerous as his reputation suggested. Silver-haired, sharp-eyed, expensively dressed. The prosecution's case took 2 days. They called Sheriff Bradshaw first, who testified about the arrest, the forged documents, the evidence found at Miles's property. Then came the other women, 3 of them, each telling stories sickeningly similar to Marble's. Miles had advertised for brides, extracted money, then abandoned them or made their lives miserable. Their testimonies were powerful, but Cunningham cross-examined them brutally. He found inconsistencies, suggested they were lying for revenge, implied they were women of questionable morals. By the time he was done, their credibility was shredded. Then it was Marble's turn. She walked to the witness stand on trembling legs, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Prosecutor Whitmore took her through her story. The advertisement, the letters, her journey from Philadelphia, Miles's failure to meet her, Caleb's offer of employment, Miles's return with threats, the attempted kidnapping, the forged court order. Marble kept her voice steady and her answers clear. She did not embellish. She simply told what had happened. Then Cunningham stood for cross-examination. "Mrs. Turner," he began, patronizing. "Or should I say Miss Hayes? I confess I am confused about which name to use, given how quickly you transitioned from one intended husband to another. My legal name is Marble Turner. I married Caleb Turner after your client attempted to kidnap me. How convenient. How romantic. Tell me, had you planned that from the beginning? Did you see an opportunity in Mr. Turner's grief and decide to take advantage?" "No, I had no plan except to survive. Mr. Turner offered me honest employment." "Honest employment," Cunningham repeated mockingly. "Living in his house, caring for his child, playing the role of wife in all but name. And then, when my client rightfully attempted to claim his promised bride, you suddenly decided to make it official with Mr. Turner. Your client tried to kidnap me with armed men. That is what prompted the marriage." Cunningham smiled. Yes. The alleged kidnapping. Tell me, did you read the contract you signed before traveling to Wyoming?" "I signed a letter agreeing to the marriage arrangement." "And did you not promise to fulfill the terms?" "I committed to marry him if he honored his promises. He did not show up as agreed. Or perhaps my client delayed his arrival for legitimate business reasons and found upon returning that his intended bride had already moved into another man's home." "He had no right to strike me," Marble said, letting anger show. "He had no right to forge legal documents." "Are you an expert in legal documents? Can you definitively state that paper was false?" The sheriff confirmed it was forged. "So you are relying on hearsay." Cunningham turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a young woman who came to Wyoming with nothing. She saw an opportunity in Mr. Turner's grief and seized it. When my client attempted to hold her to her legal commitments, she cried assault, manufactured charges, and convinced local law enforcement to arrest an innocent man." "That is not true," Marble protested. "Tell me, Mrs. Turner, how much did you get paid for this testimony?" "Nothing. I was paid nothing." or because you need to justify your own actions, because you need to make yourself the victim instead of the opportunistic fraud you really are. That is enough, Judge Harrison interrupted, banging his gavel. Mr. Cunningham, you will address the witness with respect. My apologies, Your Honor. I have no further questions. Marbell stepped down on shaking legs. Caleb stood and pulled her into his arms right there in the courthouse. You did good, he whispered. You told the truth. But as Marbell looked around at the faces watching them, some sympathetic, some skeptical, she wondered if truth was enough. The trial continued for 2 more days. The prosecution brought document experts who confirmed the court order was forged. They brought the station master who testified Miles had made no effort to meet Marbell's train. But Cunningham countered every point. He suggested the documents could have been forged by someone trying to frame his client. He brought character witnesses who testified to Miles's sterling reputation. He painted a picture of a successful businessman being destroyed by vengeful women. When closing arguments came, Whitmore emphasized the courage of the women who testified, the clear evidence of Miles's crimes. Cunningham focused on reasonable doubt, on the possibility this was all an elaborate conspiracy. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Marbell spent those hours pacing, while Caleb watched helplessly and Eli clung to her skirts. When the bailiff finally summoned them back, Marbell's heart was pounding. The jury filed in, faces neutral. Judge Harrison called for order, and the foreman stood. In the matter of the Territory versus Miles Dandridge, on the charge of assault, we find the defendant guilty. Marbell's knees went weak. Guilty. On the charge of attempted kidnapping, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of forgery of legal documents, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of fraud, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty on every count. Miles's face went white, then red with rage. He surged to his feet, shouting about corruption. But bailiffs were already restraining him. Judge Harrison banged his gavel. Mr. Dandridge, you have been found guilty of serious crimes against multiple women. The court sentences you to 10 years in the territorial prison with no possibility of parole for the first 5 years. 10 years. Marbell felt tears streaming down her face. Tears of relief, of vindication, of fierce joy that justice had prevailed. Caleb's arm came around her shoulders, and Eli pressed against her side. Miles was being dragged from the courtroom, still shouting threats. As he passed, his eyes locked on Marbell's. This is not over. I will get out, eventually. When you do, you will be an old man, Sheriff Bradshaw said, appearing beside them. And these folks will still be here, living their lives, having forgotten you ever existed. That is the real punishment. You will be forgotten. The words hit Miles harder than any physical blow. Then he was gone. In the aftermath of the trial, life at the Turner Ranch settled into something resembling normalcy. The notoriety faded. Marbell and Caleb fell back into their routines. But something had changed. Some barrier had broken down when Caleb held her in the courthouse. They were still maintaining separate bedrooms, but the emotional distance was eroding. Marbell would catch Caleb watching her sometimes, and she would see something in his eyes that looked like more than friendship, and she knew her own expression probably showed the same when she looked at him. They were falling in love. Slowly and inevitably, despite all their careful plans to keep this marriage purely practical. It came to a head one evening in late October. Eli had gone to bed early. Marbell was washing dishes, and Caleb was sitting at the table, supposedly reviewing ranch accounts. but mostly just watching her. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally. "Of course. Are you happy here? With this life we have built?" Marbell set down the dish and turned to face him. "Yes. Happier than I ever expected to be. Even though this is not what you planned, even though you are married to a man you barely know, especially because of those things," Marbell said. "Everything I planned fell apart, but what I found here is better than anything I could have planned." He stood and crossed to where she stood by the sink. "I think I am falling in love with you. I did not plan to, did not think I could after Sarah. But somewhere between the train station and the courthouse, I fell in love with my practical, convenient wife." Marbell's heart was pounding. "You do not have to say anything. I know this was not part of our agreement." "You think I do not feel the same?" Marbell asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You think I have not been falling in love with you too? With the way you care for Eli? The way you work yourself to exhaustion? The way you stood beside me in that courthouse?" Hope flared in Caleb's eyes. "You love me?" "I love you. I did not mean to. I tried not to, but I do." He reached up and cupped her face in his hands. "Can I kiss you? I have wanted to for weeks." In answer, Marbell rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative. Then Caleb's arms came around her, and the kiss deepened into something hungry and desperate. When they broke apart, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "I do not want separate rooms anymore. I do not want a marriage of convenience. I want a real marriage with you." "Yes," Marbell breathed. "Yes to all of it." That night, Marbell moved into Caleb's room. Into their room, they made love slowly, learning each other. And afterward, lying in Caleb's arms, listening to the prairie wind, Marbell felt something she had not felt since her mother died. She felt like she had come home. The winter that followed was harsh, with snow piling high and temperatures dropping. But inside the Turner house, there was warmth and laughter and love. Marbell cooked and cleaned and cared for Eli. But now she also sat with Caleb in the evenings, her head on his shoulder, planning for the future. They talked about expanding the ranch, about giving Eli siblings, about growing old together. Eli bloomed under the love of two parents who had chosen to be a family. His nightmares faded. His laughter came more easily. He started talking about his mama Sarah without devastating grief, able to remember her with love instead of only loss. One evening in early spring, Eli looked at Marbell seriously. "You know you are my mama now, right? Not pretend mama, real mama." Marbell's throat tightened. "I know, sweetheart, and you are my real son. Papa says love is stronger when you choose it instead of just getting born into it," Eli continued. "He says you and him chose to love each other, and that is special." "Your papa is a very wise man," Marbell said, meeting Caleb's eyes across the table. "Does that mean I can have a baby brother or sister soon?" Eli asked. Caleb nearly choked on his coffee, and Marbell felt her face heat with a blush, but she could not help laughing. "We will see," she said. "But whether you get siblings or not, you are stuck with your papa and me forever. We are a family now." Eli grinned and went back to eating. Over his head, Caleb reached across the table and took Marbell's hand. She squeezed back, overwhelmed with gratitude for this life, this family she had found by accident. As spring turned to summer and summer to fall, the ranch prospered. Eli grew, and Marbell's belly began to swell with the baby they had created together. She sometimes thought about that day on the train platform, about the woman she had been, desperate, frightened, alone, about how that woman had stepped off the train expecting one life and found a completely different one. She had been broken when she arrived. They had all been broken. Caleb by grief, Eli by loss, herself by years of hardship. But somehow, three broken people had found each other and built something whole. On a cold December evening, exactly 1 year after Marble had first arrived in Red Butte, she stood on the porch watching the sunset. Caleb came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her thickened waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how I came here to marry a stranger and ended up finding a family. About how sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things. Miles Dandridge sitting in prison probably does not feel like the worst thing anymore, does it?" "No," Marble agreed, "because if he had been at that station, I never would have found you." She placed her hands over his on her belly. "I would trade every disappointment to end up exactly here." "I love you, Marble Turner," Caleb said. "I love Sarah, and I always will. But I love you too, in a different way. You saved us, me and Eli both." "You saved me too," Marble reminded him. They stood together in the gathering darkness. From inside the house, they could hear Eli practicing his letters. The sound of home, of family, of the life they had built. Marbell Hayes had boarded a train in Philadelphia as a desperate woman with nowhere to go. She had stepped off in Red Butte as an abandoned mail-order bride with no hope, but she was leaving the porch tonight as Marbell Turner, wife, mother, beloved, member of a family who had chosen her. And as Caleb led her back inside to warmth and light and the sound of their son's laughter, Marble realized that sometimes the best love stories were not the ones that went according to plan. Sometimes the best stories were the ones where everything fell apart, where you lost your way and found yourself in the last place you expected. Sometimes the best stories began with a boy running across a train platform calling a stranger mama, with a cowboy who saw past desperation to the strength beneath, with a woman who learned to fight instead of run, to hope instead of hide, to love instead of merely survive. This was her story now. Not the one she had planned, but the one she had earned. The baby came in early spring, a girl with dark hair and her father's eyes. They named her Sarah Rose Turner, after the woman whose death had made room for Marbell in this family, and for the hope that bloomed even in harsh places. Marbell held her daughter in the rocking chair that had been Sarah's, the one Caleb had brought down from the attic. Eli sat at her feet, gently touching his sister's tiny hand. "She is so small," Eli whispered, his voice full of wonder. "You were this small once," Caleb said, watching from the doorway. "Did Mama Sarah hold me like this?" "Every day," Caleb confirmed. "She would rock you and sing to you for hours." "Will you sing to Sarah Rose?" Eli asked Marbell. "Every day," Marbell promised. The first months with a newborn were exhausting but joyful. The house that had been filled with grief was now filled with baby cries and laughter. Neighbors came to visit, bringing food and baby clothes. Even Mrs. Jameson stopped by with a beautiful knitted blanket. "You have done well here, Marbell," the older woman said, using her first name for the first time. "Sarah would be proud of the family you have built." One afternoon in late summer, Sheriff Bradshaw rode out to the ranch. Marble's heart clenched when she saw him, afraid of bad news about Miles. "No need to worry," the sheriff assured her quickly. "I just wanted to update you." Dandridge tried to appeal his sentence. His lawyer claimed the trial was unfair, that the evidence was questionable. But the Territorial Supreme Court upheld the conviction. He will serve the full 10 years. "Thank God," Marbell breathed. "There is more," the sheriff continued. Those 3 women who testified, they have all started new lives. One of them married a shopkeeper in Cheyenne. Another opened a dress shop in Laramie. The third went back east to her family. They wanted me to thank you. They said your courage gave them courage. After the sheriff left, Marbell sat on the porch with baby Sarah in her arms. She thought about those women, about how one person's decision to stand up could ripple outward, changing lives they would never even meet. Caleb joined her, settling into the chair beside hers. You are thinking deep thoughts. I am thinking about how much has changed in less than 2 years, about how I almost married a monster, about how being abandoned at that train station was the best thing that ever happened to me. Best for all of us, Caleb said. He reached over and took her hand. I spent 6 months after Sarah died just going through the motions, getting up because Eli needed me to, but not really living. You brought us back to life. We brought each other back, Marbell corrected. As the sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Eli came running from the barn. Papa, one of the horses is having her foal. Come quick. Caleb stood. Want to come watch? Marbell looked down at baby Sarah, sleeping peacefully in her arms. I will stay here with her. You and Eli go. She watched them run to the barn together, father and son, and felt her heart swell with love. A year and a half ago, she had stood alone on a train platform, terrified and abandoned. Now she sat on the porch of her own home, holding her daughter, watching her husband and son, surrounded by the life they had built together. The next Sunday, the whole family went to church in Red Butte. It was Sarah Rose's first time, and half the town gathered around to admire her. Marbell held her daughter, while Caleb kept a protective hand on Eli's shoulder. Reverend Matthews approached after the service. Mrs. Turner, I wonder if you might consider speaking to our ladies group next month about your experiences, about standing up for what is right. Me? Speak to a group? Your story has inspired many women in this territory. Women who feel trapped or afraid, hearing how you found courage might help them find theirs. Marbell looked at Caleb, who nodded encouragingly. I suppose I could try. The ladies' group meeting was held on a Thursday afternoon at the church. Marbell was nervous, but when she stood before the assembled women, she found her voice. I came to Wyoming as a mail-order bride, she began. I was desperate and alone, and I thought marrying a stranger was my only option. But that stranger turned out to be a criminal who preyed on vulnerable women. When I discovered the truth, I had a choice. I could run or I could fight. I chose to fight, not because I was brave, but because running meant he would hurt other women. Standing up was terrifying. The trial was humiliating, but it was worth it, because now Miles Dandridge is in prison, and 7 women he victimized have found justice. She paused, looking around the room. I am not special. I am just a woman who decided she deserved better than scraps, who decided her dignity was worth defending, and if I can do that, so can any of you. You deserve respect. You deserve safety. You deserve to be treated as full human beings, not property. And if someone tries to tell you otherwise, you have the right to stand up and fight back. The room erupted in applause. Several women approached her afterward with tears in their eyes, sharing their own stories of hardship and survival. One young woman, barely 20, said, My father wants me to marry a man twice my age who already buried 2 wives. I was going to just accept it because what choice do I have? But hearing your story, I realize I do have a choice. I can say no. You absolutely can, Marbell affirmed. And if you need help, if you need a place to stay while you figure things out, you come to the Turner Ranch. We will help you. That night, Marble told Caleb about the meeting. I may have just invited a runaway girl to stay with us. Good, Caleb said simply. We have the room. And after what you went through, helping other women seems right. Over the next few months, word spread. The Turner Ranch became known as a safe place for women in difficult situations. They took in a young widow whose in-laws were trying to steal her late husband's property. They sheltered a woman escaping an abusive marriage until she could get passage to her sister in Denver. They helped a former saloon girl find respectable work as a schoolteacher. The ranch prospered, not just financially, but in spirit. It became a place of second chances, of new beginnings, of hope. One evening in late autumn, almost 2 years to the day after Marbell had first arrived in Red Butte, the whole family gathered on the porch after supper. Eli was teaching Sarah Rose to clap her hands. Caleb had his arm around Marbell's waist. Tell me the story again, Eli said, as he often did, about how you came here. Marbell smiled. Well, I got on a train in Philadelphia, traveling to marry a man I had never met. When I got to Red Butte, he was not there. I was all alone, scared, with nowhere to go. And then I saw you, Eli said, excitedly. And then you saw me. You ran across that platform and called me Mama, even though we had never met before. Because you looked like Mama Sarah. That is right. And your papa offered me a job and a place to stay. And then the bad man came. Yes, the bad man came. But we were brave together, were we not? You climbed out the window and ran for help. You saved me. We saved each other, Eli said, repeating what he had been told many times. We did. And then your papa and I decided to be a real family. And now we have Sarah Rose, and we help other people who need saving. And we all lived happily ever after? Eli asked, even though he knew the answer. We all lived happily ever after, Marbell confirmed. But it was not just a fairy tale ending. It was real life, messy and complicated and beautiful. There were still hard days, still challenges to face. The ranch required constant work. Money was sometimes tight. Sarah Rose woke them up at night. Eli had occasional nightmares about losing another mother, but through it all, they had each other. They had built something solid and true from the ruins of their separate griefs. On the second anniversary of her arrival, Marbell stood on the train platform in Red Butte. Not alone this time, but with her whole family. They were meeting a young woman named Emma who had written from Kansas, responding to one of the discreet advertisements Marbell now placed in Eastern newspapers. Not advertisements for husbands, but for women seeking fresh starts. The train pulled in, and a young woman stepped down onto the platform, looking frightened and hopeful. Marbell recognized that expression. She had worn it herself 2 years ago. "Emma?" Marbell called out. The young woman turned, relief flooding her face when she saw a friendly smile instead of judgment. "Welcome to Wyoming," Marbell said, taking Emma's hand. "I am Marbell Turner. This is my husband Caleb, my son Eli, and my daughter Sarah Rose. We are here to help you start over." As they walked to the wagon together, Marbell caught Caleb's eye. He smiled at her, that rare, full smile that transformed his face. She had come to this platform broken and desperate. Now she returned strong and whole, offering to others what had been offered to her, a second chance, a safe place, hope. The wagon rolled away from the station, carrying the Turner family and their newest guest toward the ranch, toward home. And in the distance, the sun set over the endless Wyoming prairie, painting everything in gold. Beautiful and harsh and full of promise, just like the life Marble had built here. She had learned that sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes, that being abandoned can be the first step toward being found, that broken people can heal each other, that love chosen is stronger than love inherited, and that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to stand up anyway. These were the lessons she would teach her children. These were the truths she would share with every woman who needed saving. And as the wagon carried them home through the gathering dusk, Marble Turner looked at her family, her real chosen family, and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The mail-order bride who never was had become something better. A wife, a mother, a fighter, a helper, a woman who turned abandonment into destiny and built a family from the ashes of broken dreams. And if that was not a happily ever after, Marbell did not know what was.